get into our topic, like what are the types of dramas we have? Are the same like poetry, or or is it something different? Let us see get into our topic. So, in types of drama, what are the types? One is comedy, and then again there is a tragedy. So, in comedy there are subgenres, and in tragedy also there are some subgenres. And this is all about drama. And one more uh, topic is tragic comedy. So these all you'll find in the types of drama. So what are the subgenres of comedy in types of drama? There are nothing but there's classical attire. Same, we do have the same thing in the um, poetry as well. And there are romantic comedy, and we have comedy of humors and comedy of manners. And we also, your textbook is also giving you some good examples, some good amount of examples you have. And then there is when you take about tragedy, we have subgenres like Greek tragedy and Roman tragedy. And there is one more interesting topic here. It is called revenge tragedy. Okay, so in tragedy, these are the subgenres. And after this, you have tragic comedy and domestic tragedy. These are the two different new topics which will come across. So, classic attire, I don't think I have to make a specific point of those things. Classic attire, you already know. These are the theaters mostly played in the Greece and Rome. Yeah, these plays gave a good amount of um, comic genres and the dramatic effect, and most of the cl- lifestyle of a uh, rich to common to rich people's lifestyle can be seen mostly as a play in the classic attire. So we have a good examples there, and then there is a romantic comedy. When we say romantic, we'll never miss about the Shakespeare comedies. Shakespeare wrote his writings in tragic, in tragedy, in comedy, in romantic, and he done some good theater plays, right? So let us know about in tragedy. Let us know about the comedy of humors. Okay, in drama. And who is a good example for comedy of humors is none other than Benson. So Benson concept of humor was an extension of the medieval theory of humors, which was related to the psychological belief that the physical, mental, and emotional health of a person was controlled by the four elements, and namely earth, air, fire, and water. This topic is made, the comedy runs in a story in these elements, which namely like earth, air, fire, and water. So what is let's talk about comedy of manners. Restoration comedy of manners can also be called as restoration comedy or artificial comedy, the prevailing kind of drama in the second half of the 17th century, before the advent of the so-called sentimental comedy in the early 18th. You can see such kind of comedy of manners came into existence. Some well-known examples like William, oh, this is hard to pronounce, William the Shirley, the country wife, Apra Bahan, the rover, and the rover part two, William Converse. So part one, part two kind of thing is coming from late 1677. Okay, that's not a new thing for us. Remember that. And then we will get to another topic in comedy is called phrase. This is a new term for us, but we should we should be knowing what it is all about. A comic dramatic piece that uses highly improbable situations like stereotyped characters, extravagant exaggeration, and violent horseplay. So, Fairs is talking all about stereotyped characters, extravagant exaggerations as the peaks levels of hyperbole, and violent horseplay. The term also refers to the class or form of a drama made up of such compositions. Phrase is generally regarded as intellectually and aesthetically inferior to comedy in its crude characterizations and impossible plots, but it has been sustained by its popularity in performance and has persisted throughout the Western world till date, to the present. All right, this is all about phrases. We finished the topics like comedy of manners, comedy of humors, classical satire, and romantic comedy, and there is phrase. Okay, now let's talk about the black comedy. This form of drama which displays cynicism and disillusionment, human beings without hope or convictions, their lives controlled by fate or unknown, incomprehensible powers. A genre popular in the second half of the 20th century when the absurd predicament of mankind is increasingly in the focus of literature. So, this black comedy came into existence in the second half of the 20th century. Um, Translated from the French comédie noire. Okay, this form is translated from the French. Okay, and the blacks, those were the period. Blacks uh, were dominated by the whites, and they were took dragged from their homelands and taken as a slaves into the new country. So when this was all this, when these things are going on in the late 20th century, black comedy came into existence. You have to, you should be knowing those points all about the black comedy. Then we'll go to our next concept called tragedy. Here I don't have I don't need to explain what is tragedy about. So let us look into the genres, what all the genres we have in the tragedy. So there is Greek tragedy, that ancient Greek tragedy, and the Roman tragedy. So what Greek tragedy is telling us about? Greek tragedy was a popular and influential form of drama performed in theaters across ancient Greece. All right, from the late 6th century BC. So the most famous playwrights of of this genre were Sophocles, Euripides, and Aeschylus. It's those terms are really hard, and my mouth won't turn it. Okay, forget about the names. And many of their works were still performed centuries after their initial premiere. Greek tragedy led to Greek comedy, and together these genres formed the foundation upon which all modern theater is based. You're getting it right. From where are these Greek tragedy led to? So, first, there is first Greek tragedy came into existence, then it is led by Greek comedy, and together these two genres create a great foundation upon with all the modern theater is based. Okay, the exact origins of tragedy are debated amongst the scholars. Some have linked the rise of the genre which begins in Athens. At the earlier art form, the lyrical performance of epic poetry. Others suggest a strong link with the rituals performed in the worship of Dionysus, which such as a sacrifice of goats, a song ritual called a tragodia. That means the tragedy came uh took t- took place after this Greek word, and the wearing of masks. So what are the things going on here? The rituals performed while worshipping which god? Dionysus. And also giving sacrifices of animals like goats. And then the spiritual song called tragodia. And another thing called wearing of masks. Indeed, Dionysus became known as a god of theater and prepares. There is another connection, the drinking rites, which resulted in the worshipper losing full control of their emotions, and in effect and dance of Dionysiac ritual was most evident in the role of the chorus and the music provided by an Paulus player by rhythmic elements were also performed in the use of first trochaic terameter and then iambic terameter in the delivery of the spoken words. These are the literary elements were taken care in the Greek tragedy. So when these three Greek tragedies coming onto the stage, when there are rituals performed to worship their god, and then when there is sacrifice about the sacrifice giving to gods, killing the animals by killing the animals, and then there is this tragic song playing, and then when the marks wearing masks is created. So when these things were people were doing about these things, most of the tragic comedy took place in such events. All right. And what what is the rhythmic pattern they have believed they try to perform? It is trochaic tetrameter and limbic triameter. They are using two things here. There is tetrameter and tri triameter. Triameter is in iambic form and tetrameter is in trochaic performed, and this is performed not in theater, but it is performed in an open air theater, such as that of Dionysus in Athens, and seemingly upon to all of the male population. The plot of the tragedy was almost always inspired by episodes from Greek mythology, which we must remember were often a part of Greek religion. As a consequence of this serious subject matter, which often dealt and right and wrongs, no violence was permitted on the stage, and the death of the character had been heard from off stage and not seen. Are you getting me? Although they were taking care of all these songs in a particular iambic meter or tetrameter, iambic meter, and there is also song of tragedy, and there is also uh, a Greek tragedy playing when they were wearing masks, and there is also Greek tragedy when they're sacrificing to gods. But when they are performing all these genres in the Greek subgenres in the Greek tragedy, but they were also very much taking care. There is nothing going wrong on the play when the play is going on, like violence or the death of a character is not performed directly in front of the audience, which is foretold in the mic, or they were narrated like this after this the character has died, or after this so and so has happened, but they are not directly showing the violence directly to the audience. This is what they have to care in those time of Greek tragedy, which is again important point. Similarly, at least in the early stages of this genre, the poet could not make comments or political statements through the play, and the more direct treatment of contemporary events had to wait for the arrival of the less austere and conventional genre Greek comedy. So they were very much taking care of not telling the the poet or the narrator not giving directly comments, or doing the political statements directly on a play, but they are waiting for a uh, particular period where if, for example, for a convention genre, so that they'll see, they take care about the audience and they'll see whether to deliver such kind of dialogues or not. It depends upon the audiences it so. Ancient Greek tragedies typically consisted of a protagonist of a high rank who makes an error of judgment and accepts his fall from grace. Other important elements include gods, mythology, conflict, suffering, and catharsis. Okay, what are the ancient Greek ancient Greek tragedies are typically consisted of what? There is definitely a protagonist, like a hero, right? And he has a high rank, but what he'll make a mistake, he'll make an error in the play and he'll fall back from the grace. Other important elements which were taken care in the ancient Greek tragedy is all about the elements like gods. Mythology is again a um, um, ongoing topic on their ancient Greek tragedies, and they can play a conflict thing or suffering and catharsis. And what is this catharsis? Catharsis is nothing but it is an emotional release or purification that a person experiences typically through art or emotional experiences. Because it is an art form, catharsis is something like letting it go, the expression of any emotional thing, we are letting it go. So this is again a typical art form. It is often used to describe the process of releasing pent up emotions such as sadness, anger, or fear, which leads to a feeling of relief and cleansing. In literature, catharsis is a concept introduced by Aristotle. Who introduced catharsis? Catharsis is introduced by Aristotle, who believed that tragedy allows audience to experience and purge emotions like pity and fear, resulting in emotional renewal. In modern uses, catharsis can occur through activities like writing, talking, creating art, or even physical activities like going to gym that help to release emotion and tension, all these things for our modern use. So Aristotle is the one who came up first time came up with the catharsis. So the next will go after this ancient Greek tragedy. Let's talk about Roman tragedy. The first important works of Roman literature were the tragedies and comedies written by Livius Andronicus in the beginning of 240 BC. Then 5 years later, Gnaeus Naevius, a younger contemporary of Andronicus also began to write drama, composing in both genres as well. No plays from either writer have survived. By the beginning of the second century BC, drama had become firmly established in Rome, and a guild of writers, collegium, and poetarium has been formed. Now, no early Roman tragedy survives, though it was regarded highly in its days. Historians know of three early tragedians like Vade, Ennius, Pacuvius, and Lucius. Lucius Accius. So the very hard to pronounce. One important aspect of tragedy that differed from other genres was the implementation of choruses that were included in the action on the stage during the performances of many tragedies. This is the difference between the other tragedies and the Roman tragedy. From the time of empire, however, the work of two tragedians survives, one of by an unknown author, while the other is by the Stoic philosopher Seneca. So these two authors, because of them, the tragedian survives. For how many days? Let's see. Nine of Seneca's tragedies survive, all of which are fabulae crepidati, tragedies adapted from Greek originals. This Phaedra, for example, was based on Euripides' Hippolytus. Seneca is well known for composing works which feature a heavy presence of violence and horror, though there is no definite evidence of this. The possibility exists that Seneca intended his plays to be recited within small private groups and not for public consumption on stage. That's because there is so much of violence and horror indulged in it. So then again there is a Elizabethan tragedy. Describes what it describes a type of tragedy that may be applied to Shakespeare's writing. This type of tragedy typically centers around one character. The story leads upon to and includes the death of this character, who is the protagonist, more specifically referred to as a tragic hero. In Elizabethan tragedy, the death of the tragic hero never comes easily or quickly. Instead, a troubled part of the hero's life leads upon his death. The suffering and the calamity of the hero must also be an exceptional nature. In other words, an essential previous happy existence must be shattered by some unforeseen calamity. And these all features of Shakespearean writing you can see in all his writings like Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, and Hamlet. So it is like a uh, descending order. You can see first he wrote Othello in 1604. King Lear came into existence in 1606. In the same era, Macbeth has also came into existence. Then Hamlet in around 1607. This is all about the Elizabethan tragedy, and which is very simple. In Elizabethan tragedy, there is a protagonist, a center heart of the story, or center character of the story. And what happens to him? He um he is first, essentially, primarily, he's in a happy existence. He's in his peace mode, happy mode, and later the graph of the character will completely shutters down, falls down with an unseen calamity. Something tragedy hits him, and you will see a great fall, just not saying by words. He will show, Shakespeare show all the uncertainty of the protagonist. So these are the quite good examples of them. Then there is a revenge tragedy. I think all of you like to giving revenge, right? Okay. One of the great influences on the early modern revenge play genre was the translation of the works of the Roman playwright Seneca. Where did we hear about the Seneca? Seneca, we talk about in the Roman tragedy. He wrote some, she wrote some, he or she wrote some 6 to 7 works in the romantic uh, Roman tragedy. Okay, so what is all about Seneca here in Revenge Tragedy is nothing but into English in the last half of the 16th century. Seneca's tragedies concern the heroic figures of a classical legend and borrowed from such playwrights as Aeschylus, Aeschylus, Euripides, and Sophocles. The tragedies were filled with horrifying events such as, oh my God, cannibalism, incest, rape, and violent death. No, 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 no. Revenge is also a theme in many of Seneca's plays, like Hippolytus. Theseus takes revenge on his son for the supposed rape of Phaedra while in Agamemnon. The ghost of Thetis urges Augustus towards revenge. Revenge and violence are all associated with ghosts in several other Senecan plays. Okay. Revenge tragedies are dramatic works in which one character seeks revenge upon another character for an evil doing, most often associated with the Jacobean era. These revenge tragedies were actually a revival from Roman times. Excellent examples of revenge tragedies include William Shakespeare Hamlet and John Webster the White Devil, and also the Duchess of Malfi. William Shakespeare Hamlet in 1609, John Webster the White Devil 1612, and the Duchess of Malfi. Now, let us talk about tragic and comedy both together. A dramatic work incorporating both tragic and comedic elements, which coined by the Roman dramatists, purists, and Plautus in the 2nd century BC. The word denoted a play in which gods and men and masters and slaves reverse the roles traditionally assigned to them. Gods and heroes acting in comic burlesque and slaves adapting tragic dignity. This startling innovation may be seen in Plautus. All right, George Bernard Shaw said in Isben's work that it that is established tragic comedy as a more meaningful and serious entertainment than tragedy. Modern tragic comedy is sometimes used synonymously with absurdist drama, which suggests that laughter is the only response left to man when he is faced with the tragic emptiness and meaninglessness of existence. Examples of this modern type of tragic comedy are Merchant of Venice, The Winster Tale, and The Tempest. These are all the three works of again Shakespeare. And then there is The Wild Duck, which who has wrote this Henrik Ibsen Ghost. And we have The Cherry Orchid, Who wrote this? Anton Chekhov, Uncle Vanya. And we also have Samuel Beckett, Endgame, and Arnold Pinter, The Dumbwaiter. So, what all the examples of our tragic comedy? The Merchant of Venice, The Winter's Tale, and also The Tempest of William Shakespeare are the good examples of tragic comedy. And we also have the works like The Wild Duck, The Cherry Orchid, and The Dumbwaiter, and the End Game of Samuel Macbeth. Now, we came to the last subgenre of the tragic tragedy, that is nothing but the domestic tragedy. These dramas of what domestic tragedy in the Elizabethan period, but broke from previously established conventions, instead portraying the common man in the domestic setting as a tragic hero. For example, as opposed to the character of nobility in a palatial setting. Domestic tragedy is a drama in which the tragic protagonists are ordinary middle class or lower class individuals, in contrast to the classical and neoclassical tragedy, in which the protagonists are of kingly or aristocratic rank and their downfall is an affair of state as well as a personal matter. So domestic tragedy is mainly taking care in the two levels of classes, like ordinary middle class and the lower class individuals. All right. The earliest known examples, okay, of domestic tragedy are three anonymously late Elizabethan dramas. Arden of Feversham, The Warning of Fairy Woman, The Yorkshire Tragedy. These three are the good examples of the domestic tragedy when in the late Elizabethan dramas. Okay. So what are those three examples? I'll repeat again. Arden of Feversham. And this is all the story of the murder of Mr. Arden by his wife and her lover and their subsequent execution. Okay, his wife and his lover plots a plan and kills her husband, and then they will again followed by the subsequent execution. This is all the story is all about. It came in the in the 1591, and the story name is Ardin of Feversham. Then there is also another story called the Warning Work, another work called A Warning for Fairy Woman, and it has written in the year of 1599, which deals with the again murder of an AI merchant by his wife. So again, this also is a murder of by his own wife. Next, Yorkshire tragedy, in which a father destroys his family. Okay, that's why you can see the all lower middle class this is all the stories run around the lower middle class family. And some more examples in the modern times are Thomas Hayward, and he wrote A Woman Killed and Kindness. George Lillo wrote The London Merchant. Henrik Ibsen wrote A Doll's House. Eugene O'Neill wrote The Iceman Cometh. Okay, these are again the few more examples of some modern times. Domestic tragedy found its mature expression in the plays of Henrik Ibsen. We already discussed, he wrote A Doll's House. The end of the 19th century and In earlier domestic dramas by other playwrights, the protagonists were sometimes villains also, and it's sometimes merely pathetic. But the Borgia's heroes of Isabel's brand in 1866 are Rosemary Sholom in 1886, The Master Builder in 1892, and When We Died Awaken. When We Died Awaken, 1899. This title, When We Died Awaken, which strikes my mind, is called the literary form of oxymoron. We have discussed this. Oxymoron is nothing but the opposite ideas in a sentence, like contradictory ideas in one sentence. So here, that that person cannot be awake. So when we did awaken, I think that's a good example of oxymoron. Okay, let's keep our literary terms aside. Are endowed with some of the isolated grandeur of the heroes of classical tragedy. So, for now, we have finished all the types of dramas. Drama we is a mode of fictional representation through dialogue and performance. It is a literary genre, which is an intimation of some action. I'm just summarizing up all the topics what we have covered. Drama is intended to replicate human behavior and action in the midst of the tragedy and everyday life. There are two main genres of drama, that is tragedy and comedy. Two other important types of drama are melodrama and tragicomedy. Although different kinds of drama have different features, all of them contain certain amount common elements of drama such as theme and subject, story and plot, characteristics, dialogue, and spectacle. This is all about is drama. Now, let us go to our next topic called the practical criticism of poetry. You know what is criticism, right? By this by the end of the unit, we'll know what is practical criticism, what practical criticism of poetry is, what are the different elements and tools. Again, we are from the beginning, we are all knowing about the tools and devices and elements. So here also we'll know the different tools and elements of analysis of poetry are, and we'll also know how to analyze a poem. First, let us all know about what is practical criticism. Practical criticism is the analysis of a text based on the close reading. I've already discussed this in the day first. The text may be a poem or a passage of a prose or an extract from a play. You may not have seen the text before, and you may not know who wrote the poem or the passage. You may also not be told who you should look for in the text or what you should find. Thus, practical criticism is the analysis of an unseen text using certain analytical tools rather than prior knowledge of the text or the author. So, when you're analyzing a poem and doing some criticism of some topic, you will come up with such kind of topics where you don't know who is the author and you don't know where is this bit of work taken from. All right. Then practical criticism encourage readers to concentrate on the words on the page rather than depending on the preconceived notations preconceived notions about a text. In a way, particular criticism, therefore, is like dissembling a machine to understand how it works. All right. Practical criticism of poetry is not only reading and understanding a poem, but the ability to explain what you have understood. In order to do this, you have to not only read the poem carefully, but use some objective criteria to evaluate it. You also have to look at the various components of the poem and see how each of them contributes to the overall meaning and effect of the poem. Some of the components you should consider are the title of the poem, the language used, the structure of the poem, the arrangement of stanzas, rhyme, and rhythm, the subject and the theme, and so on. So, what are they asking you to concentrate? Some of the components you should consider are the title of the poem, the language used, the structure of the poem, the arrangement of stanzas, rhythm, and rhyme, the subject and the theme, and so on. Thus, practical criticism of the poetry involves close reading of the verse on the page, noting what their literally meaning is and thinking about what their figurative meaning could be, and finding evidence in the poem to support your overall opinion about it. So what are we'll get from doing that? We will understand the words on the page. We will know the literary meaning is and thinking about what the figurative meaning could be, and finding evidence in the poem to support your overall opinion about it. Now, we'll look into the elements and tools of analysis of poetry. Sorry. What are the tools and elements we have? We have style and structure of the poem. We have the title of the poem. Then we have a repetition in a poem. Then we have opening and closing lines of a poem. We'll take care of. And then we'll have the speaker, what of speaker of a poem. We have a mode of the poem. Then we have fantasy and reality in a poem. Then theme of a poem. Oh, we forgot about the rhyme, rhythm, and meter. Figurative language and connotations. And then by then we will understand if we read a poem, what is this all about? Okay. Chalo. First, first is the style and structure. When we read a poem, for example, we have here an example called Fog. And who wrote it? Called Sandberg has written the poem called Fog. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent hunches and then moves on. When we read about the poem, the first thing you need notice is its structure and style. The structure of the poem is a number of stanzas in it, okay? And the style is a manner in which the poem communicates its meaning. Now, after reading this poem, we understood that the poem has how many stanzas? It has two stanzas, right? The first stanza is of two lines, and the second stanza is of four lines. The poem used strong imagery. Fog is compared to a cat. Is it so? The fog comes on little cat feet. The silence of the cat tread, the small size of the feet of an average cat, the manner of its sitting, its objective watching technique, and its vagrant nature of not staying in one place are all used to convey the poet's view of the fog. What kind of poem is it? Is it an epic? Is it a lyric? Is it a narrative poem? Is it a conventional poem? So, after seeing the structure and after seeing the structure and style, we will understand what poem is this all about. Is it a epic poem? No. Is it a lyric? Could be. Is it a narrative poem? No. Is it a conventional poem? No. Then this should be a lyric. Now, next comes the title of the poem often helps us to understand it better because it summarizes the ideas and thoughts of the poem. Sometimes the title reflects the poem means and sometimes it surprises the reader. Fire and Ice by Robert Frost. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I have tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire, but if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. Wow, what a beautiful poem is by Robert Frost. What an intellectual. What is the meaning of the title? Is it obvious? Fire and ice? No. Does the title suggest multiple possibilities? Yes. What are the words in the title associated with the poem Fire and Ice? Does the title strike a balance? Very well. Right? You understand your why there are questions on all the short poems which are there in your because for you to understand the deeper meaning of the structure style of the poem and also to understand the theme of it and how the author is trying to differentiate the um, uh, g- trying to tell his narration and repetition in the poem is a repetition in the poem there. Sometimes it could be and some there is a example of Edgar Allan Poe, the poem called Bells. Here you can see the repetition of the words. Hear the sledges with the bells, silver bells. What a world of merriment their melody foretells. How they tinkle, tinkle, tinkle in the icy air of night, while the stars that oversprinkle all the heavens seem to twinkle with the crystalline delight, keep time, 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 in a sort of runic rhyme to the tintinnabulation that so musically wells from the bells, 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 from the jingling and the tinkling of the bells. Here, readers should read through the poem several times, at least once aloud. Why they should not key passages and look for the repetition of specific words, phrases, or verse in the poem. If readers notice repetition in the poem, they should think about why certain information or certain words have been repeated. Repetition is often used in poetry to emphasize a feeling or idea, creation, rhythm, or develop a sense of urgency. Note how in the following poem the word bells is repeated throughout the poem to imitate the counting ringing of bells. Opening and closing lines. Opening and closing lines will also make a very good impact on readers. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or the fester like a sore and then run? Does it sink like rotten meat or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load or does it explode? Sometimes the poet uses the first line to grab the attention of the reader by saying something totally unexpected. For example, the poem titled Poetry begins with a line where the poet declares, I too dislike it. I too dislike it. Although, by the end of the poem convinces the reader that not only the poet but the reader too is interested in poetry. Similarly, Harlem A poem by the African American poet Langston Hughes begins with the rhetorical question: what happens to a deemed Driftwood? And after considering various options, it ends with an unexpected possibility, or does it explode? Rhetorical question. So here, writer is starting his poem with the rhetorical question: what happens to a deemed Driftwood? To grab the attention of the readers. And there is one more poem of Marilyn Moore declares, I too dislike it. Poetry begins with a line where the poet Marian Moore declares, I too dislike, although by the end of the poem convinces the reader that not only the poet, but the reader too is interested in the poetry. The cloths of heaven, the clothes of heaven. Had I the heavens embroidery clothes, enwrought with the golden and silver light, the blue and the dim and the dark clothes of night and light and the half light. I would spread the clothes under your feet, but I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly because you tread on my dreams. Next comes the speaker of the poem. And why this is also a tool or devices of analyzing. Let's see. In the following poem, the poet addresses the reader directly. The speaker is a woman, not an one woman in particular. The speaker speaks from her experience, and yet her voice is universal as she speaks to all the downtrodden people, defying their oppressors. Defying their oppressors. Still I rise by Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lines. You may trudge me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise. Just like moons and like suns, with the uncertainty of tides, just like hope spring high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes? Shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air I rise. Don't you think so? What a motivation for all the girls out there. It's like someone speaking to me, to my heart. This is the speaker of the poem. And what is the speaker of the poem in a literary element is saying? The speaker can be a woman or a man, not any woman or any man in a particular. The speaker speaks from her own experience, and yet her voice is universal as she speaks to all downtrodden people, defying their oppressors. Fantasy and reality in a poem. Let's see the fantasy element in a poem. "'Tis the voice of the lobster," I heard him declare. "You have baked me too brown. I must sugar my hair. As a duck with its eyelids, so he with his nose trips his belt and his buttons and turns out his toes. When the sands are all dry, he is as gay as a lark, and will talk in contemptuous tones of the shark. But when the tide rises and sharks surround, his voice has a timid and tremulous sound. The voice of the lobster. Who wrote this? By Lewis Carroll. And let's see what is the mode of the poem here. The poet creates the mood of a poem by using words that influence the reader's impressions of the poem. In the examples below, the first one, simplicity, is a happy poem because words such as simplicity, happy, rambles, independent, glows convey the happy mood. In the second poem, to the sad moon, the negative mood of the poem is conveyed through the use of words like sad, silent, vain face, languish, ungrateful, etc. Okay, let's talk about the Simplicity poem by Emily Dixon. How happy is a little stone that rambles in the road alone and doesn't care about careers and exigencies, never fears. Whose coat of elemental brown, passing universe put on, and independent as a sun, associates or glows alone, fulfilling absolute decree in the casual simplicity. To the Sad Moon by Sir Philip Sidney. With how stand with how sad steps, O moon, thou climbedst the skies, how silently and with how wan a face. What may it be the even in heavenly place that bushy archer his sharp arrows tries? Tries? Sure, if that long with love acquainted eyes can judge of love, thou feels that a lover's case. I read it in thy looks, thy languished grace, to me that feel the like, thy state descries. Then, even of fellowship, O moon, tell me, is constant love deemed there, but want of wit? Are beauties there or proud as here they be? Do they above love to be loved, and yet those lovers crown whom that love doth possess? Do they call virtue their ungratefulness? My heart leaps. Rhyme and meter is another term. Rhyme is the other term. Figurative language or connotations are there. Please, you go through your book and you have a lovely poem to practice about our Sir Rabindranath Tagore, Where the Mind is Without Fear. Please go through that poem and you will understand. You have some questions down there. You'll understand which figurative speech is it, and then some examples. It also has some examples of alteration and the sentiment. So please go through your textbooks and we let's call it for a day. We'll end this class. It was nice mm, sharing the knowledge with you people. Let's wind up the class. All the best for your exams. Take care.